Hey, welcome back to World Entertainment. And Fede Alvarez has given big interviews regarding Alien Romulus, and it gives us kind of a hint of what his ideas was for this movie, where it's set, what we can kind of expect and stuff. And he does kind of confirm that it is connected to all the movies, including Prometheus and Covenant, as well as being set in between Alien and Aliens. So there is a lot to go over in this one. It's quite a big one, so we'll get right into it. So this is from the person asking the question, and their question is: the first thing anyone watching the new trailer will be struck by is how your film's retro-futuristic production design recalls the Nostromo. Is it your hope that Romulus will feel of a piece with Ridley Scott's Alien? And he answered, it was the era I was most interested in when we were thinking about making this movie and we're suddenly faced with so many choices. Where do you start? That's what I wanted it to be. That era of science fiction and practically that physical space of the first movie. So it starts there, honestly. And there were narrative reasons why. It takes place 20 years after the first film. Technology in the world of Alien can change vastly. But I think it's not dependent on time. It's dependent on place, where you are. So the characters of this movie and the world are very blue collar. The technology is still very low tech and analog. And look, I'm a kid from the 80s. Any monitor with some VHS tracking issues puts a lot of joy in my heart. So I wonder if that last part is kind of referencing those little screens down that corridor shot. He continues, just like anybody else, I've been appalled by bad CG in movies that have ruined my experience of it. But I'm not against it. I think you have to do whatever's best for the shot, and whatever technique does it better, you should do it. We went to crazy extents in this movie to do things practically. We had Weta Workshop doing a lot of the facehuggers. And not only that, we brought back the guys that worked on Aliens. Shane Mann, who sculpted the Queen's head himself, was the one in charge of building all the xenomorphs for our movie. So the great thing hearing about that is they have used practical effects. I said one of the issues I had with the trailer was the facehuggers looking a bit CG. Obviously when they're running around they're CG. When they're attached to you, no doubt. Maybe even if they're moving slowly at times, I would assume that's practical. But apparently all the xenomorphs are practical. So that's interesting. It's also interesting that he's kind of hinting that there's definitely more than one xenomorph. But he continues anyway and says, and when I say build, we built them. We did full animatronics for all the creatures in the movie. It was one of the best experiences in my career. Just to see these guys that I admire so much back working together. There were moments when we'd need 9 puppeteers to make a creature work, and you had all those guys, now in their 60s, under the table, and I'm there with them because there's not enough hands. I got to be under the table, puppeteering these things with the guys that worked on the original Aliens. So that's been the best part. And then CG just comes in when you really go, oh, if we do something here, we could do something really cool that the puppets never could. And you go there, but we really tried and we really succeeded. So again, that's good to hear. He also then says, he gets asked about the pulse rifle at the end because people were picking up. That's the pulse rifle, but it looks different. And he says, it is a pulse rifle. You have to think that our movie is decades before Aliens. So the pulse rifle, as people know it from Aliens, has not been invented yet. We can go really deep into the canon rabbit hole. But the pulse rifle was invented a few years before Aliens by this general. This is a predecessor, but it's technically pulse technology what she's holding. And yes, of course, the story called for a moment when she was coming out of the elevator. And obviously, you don't just walk out of an elevator casually in an alien movie. So when we were about to do it, we all knew if you walk out of the elevator, it better be an incredible shot. So we took a lot of care, making sure that she stepped out of the elevator in the coolest possible way. She's a young character, she's a younger character. All the characters are very young. By the way, this part is why he chose a young cast. This part is a bit silly in my opinion, but you see for yourself. So again, she's a younger character. All the characters are very young. That was inspired by the beginning of the extended cut of Aliens. There's a shot that really inspired the whole story, where you can see all the kids running around the corridor on Hadley's Hope. I always thought, wow, what would it be like for those kids to grow up in the terraforming colony that still needs another 50 years to be inhabitable? You're probably going to take the same job as your parents. What's the hope? I thought, wouldn't it be great to catch up with those characters? Not exactly those characters, but that type of young kid growing up in a Weyland-Yutani shake and bake colony, and see how their life would be when they reach their early 20s. What do they want out of life? Do they want to stay there and do what their parents did? Work the mines, work the farms, and that's it? Or do they want more out of life? That was what kickstarted the whole journey of this character. It was something I was always fascinated with. Maybe it's because I'm from Uruguay, and the idea of growing up in a place where you know how far you can get, and the things that happen there, and the things that will never happen there. So at the time, I always connected with those characters. Then he discusses his meetings with Ridley Scott and how he had pitched a film as production on Alien Covenant was starting to ramp up. So he pitched some ideas apparently towards them. So he said this: right after Don't Breathe, I had a meeting with Scott Free, Ridley's company, and I think they were about to start doing Alien Covenant. And I mentioned something that I would love to see. I said, I hope this movie has some of this and that and this. And he was like, oh, that's interesting. What would you do with it? No one was actually asking me to pitch. Believe me, it was more that they were intrigued about what I wanted to see as a fan. And I was like, I think you guys should do this and approach it this way. And maybe it's about that. And suddenly I was pitching, but I was not really being asked to do it. So that stayed in the air there somehow. And then a couple of years later, really remembered that and knew about it. He was like, Fede had pitched this thing, so they called me back and said, hey, remember that story you mentioned? Do you want to write it and direct it? And I was like, fuck yeah. And here we are. So I don't really know if that is anything to get excited about. So the two issues there are he's used things he's pitched for Alien Covenant to make this movie, and his idea for the characters was he was always interested in what did the kids want to do when they grew up. A bit weird when you hear it like that. So it goes on then as well to talk about him having talks with James Cameron about Romulus as well as Ridley Scott, after Scott seeing early cuts and stuff. So he said, as intimidating as it is, that's the best part of being able to work on something like this. For all of us and whatever it is that we do, the dream is to sit down with the masters of our craft and have a conversation about what we do and learn how to do it better. And the process of making this film definitely gave me that experience with Ridley. At the story level, we first told him what I was planning to do, and then when he read it, I discussed the script with him, and later, when he watched the movie, I discussed my cut with him. So I consider each one of those moments and creative conversations with Ridley to be the highlight of my career and my life. James Cameron is also someone I've met through the years, and when he learned that I was doing it, we started chatting about it. So I also had that conversation with him at the script level. He's now seen the movie and loved it. It's also fascinating because Cameron and Scott notes and comments are completely different. They wouldn't repeat a note. Whatever Ridley said, Cameron said something different. They were all super smart comments, notes and thoughts on the film and the filmmaking. He says something that's not in bleeding English, don't know what the hell that is. But both of them have completely different approaches. So the fantastic part of being able to make this film is to have the chance to work with them. Okay, but he didn't work with them. That's the thing. Ridley Scott wasn't actually on the set, from what we're hearing. And James Cameron had nothing to do with the movie, so it's a bit strange. He's 2 parts left of his big interview here. He says, this is regarding Kaylee Spenny's character. She's an amazing talent. I met her a few years before, and it was a complete coincidence in a way. It's a credit to her talent, but when we started writing the movie a few years ago, my co-writer and I already had her photo on the board. We put photos of faces on the board just to have a character face that we could turn to when they're going to say a line. How would that person speak? So we had her face on the board from the beginning, and I always tell Kaylee, I wrote this movie for you. So I met her and I'd seen her work, and then when this came about, I was lucky enough that she loved the script from the get-go. She then jumped aboard, and I've been thrilled to see her having so much success lately. And it ends with some of the more interesting news we heard about Alien Romulus prior to the recent leaks and trailer release was a scene that Isabelle Merced described as disgusting, and this is him talking about that. I have a feeling that scene might, well, actually he goes into it, so I'll tell you now. He says it takes place in the teaser's first shot. There's a tiny hint in there, and it has to do with that scene that Isabelle talked about, which is great. When you manage to have an idea or concept that has not been seen before in any Alien movie, and it's also something that has never happened before in the history of movies and science fiction, my first test usually when I shoot it is to just look at the boom mic guy. He has no idea what's about to happen, and then I see his face completely in shock over what he is witnessing. So that is, for me, the biggest reward. And when you know that there's something special, then you just can't wait for opening night. I'll sit in the front and turn around to see people's reactions to those moments. So that's his full story there. Obviously, what he's talking about is when we see the cryo beds covered in blood. I'm assuming that the facehuggers probably get in to those and start taking out some of the crew or something. Which is why I'm thinking the disgusting part could be that other part in the teaser we see of the facehugger being picked off someone's face and we see the tube being drawn out of the mouth. It's possibly that. If it is something to do with a chest burster, I don't know how you try and make that something radical that we've never seen before, because chest bursters come out of the chest area, hence chest burster. You can't make it different. Then you just get what we got in Covenant, where it comes out of the back. Did that thing come out of it? His back ripped open anyway. I suppose we'll just have to wait and see. The one thing that at least the trailer does confirm is that it will be exclusively on the big screen. You know, it didn't say big screen and Hulu. It said flat out big screen. So that's good news, I suppose. Again, though, the cast being so young and stuff does worry me. Ridley Scott involvement worries me, and the fact that it is officially connected to Prometheus and Covenant worries me. But it's interesting to hear his comments and kind of shed light on the time period and the aesthetics and stuff like that. So, and why he went with these young people, even though that kind of information is a bit weird. It's interesting, but it's weird. So, with that, I will leave it there for this one. So cheers, and I'll catch you in the next one.